Hey my dear listener, before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment down where are you from and what's your time right now. Let's jump into the video. Story 1. The Silent Killer, Cholera in the Backstreets of London. You step into London in the year 1832, though step might be too gentle a word for it. The streets are narrow, often slick with mud and filth, the kind that seems to seep from the very walls themselves. Cobblestones gleam after a morning rain, but the shine is deceptive. It masks the sludge, human waste, and the remnants of yesterday's market scraps. Smoke curls from chimneys, a constant haze that makes the sun a dim, yellow disk overhead. In the poorest districts, the air is not just hazy but almost fetid, carrying the unmistakable scent of decay, stagnant water, and overcrowded living. You can taste the grime before you even notice it with your nose. Cholera is already present, though few know exactly what it is. Doctors and gentlemen scientists call it a miasma, a poisonous fog rising from the marshes, sewers, and cesspits, infecting the unwary who breathe it. The idea that a disease could spread through water or invisible germs is not yet widely accepted. For the average Londoner, death is a lottery played daily in the back streets. You can see it in the lines of faces, children pale and listless, women bent under the weight of daily survival, men coughing quietly in corners of dark alleys. In the district of St. Giles, a warren of narrow lanes and overcrowded tenements, cholera has already begun its stealthy march. Families of 6 or 7 often occupy a single room, sharing one chamber pot that overflows regularly into the street below. Water comes from pumps that are themselves contaminated by leaking sewers, but there is no alternative. Washing is sporadic, limited by the availability of coal for the fire, and bathing is a luxury reserved for the rare few who can afford it. Children play in the muck, barefoot, chasing one another between piles of refuse, their laughter a fragile shield against the unseen danger. Mrs. Edith Tanner, a widow living in a cramped flat above a draper's shop, is already weary before her day begins. She wakes to the cries of her 3 children, all under the age of 10. The smallest, little Thomas, has a persistent cough, but she cannot spare the coal to warm water enough for a bath. Breakfast is meager, stale bread dipped in weak tea. The rest of the day will be spent scavenging for coal, selling rags, and fetching water from the nearest pump, all while keeping a wary eye on neighbors, some of whom have already succumbed to the disease. Edith has seen enough deaths in her lifetime to understand how quickly cholera works. One week, her neighbor, Mrs. Pritchard, complained of a sudden stomach pain and nausea. By the next morning, she had collapsed and never regained consciousness. The disease leaves no time for goodbyes or prayer. Symptoms appear violently: watery diarrhea, severe dehydration, cramps that seize the body like iron shackles, the skin turning ashen and cold. By the time the afflicted are found, it is often too late. Families rarely have the means to summon a physician, and even if they do, the doctors themselves are unsure. Treatments range from bleeding to herbal concoctions, but none truly halt the disease. The streets themselves are complicit. St. Giles is a maze of narrow alleys, and the refuse from dozens of families funnels down them like tiny, stinking rivers. Night soilmen tasked with emptying chamber pots trudge through with carts, spilling contents that mix freely with rainwater. You can imagine, if you dare, the tiny bacteria riding on these droplets, invisible and merciless. There are no sanitation workers in the modern sense, no regulations demanding that sewers be separate from water sources. Everything necessary for survival, the water, the food, the very air you breathe, carries risk. Despite the grim conditions, life continues. Vendors shout over the din of the streets, selling bread, meat, and the occasional sweet treat, though prices are often beyond the reach of the poorest. Children rush through puddles, playing marbles with whatever coins they can scrounge, oblivious to the danger that stalks them. In the dimly lit interiors of tenements, mothers knead dough for the day's bread, fathers mend shoes or weave baskets, each task a fragile act of resistance against hunger, disease, and despair. It is here in these daily routines that cholera finds its victims. The disease does not discriminate. It strikes the young, the old, the strong, and the weak. But the poor, packed tightly into unsanitary conditions, are particularly vulnerable. Observers of the time noted a curious pattern. Wealthier districts with better water and less crowding seemed safer, almost untouched, while the disease raged in the narrow backstreets. It is a cruel reminder that survival often depended less on strength or character, and more on the geography of poverty. Medical theory at the time offers no true comfort. Edwin Chadwick, an early proponent of sanitary reform, has suggested that cleansing the streets could reduce disease, but his ideas are slow to gain traction. Local authorities are overwhelmed or indifferent. In 1832, London's population exceeds 1.5 million, concentrated in dense urban pockets. Resources are stretched thin, and cholera continues its stealthy spread. You begin to realize that in these streets, knowledge is a luxury, and survival is often a matter of luck or proximity to wealth. The human stories are what linger in the mind. Little Thomas Tanner spends hours playing in puddles outside the house, oblivious to his earlier cough. His older sister, Mary, hauls buckets of water for cooking, careful not to spill the precious liquid, though she knows full well it may carry death. Edith worries constantly, packing the floor at night, listening for any sudden cries or the telltale gurgling that might signal the onset of illness. The anxiety is constant, an undercurrent of dread that never fully recedes. And yet there are glimpses of resilience. Neighbors share coal, food, and advice. Informal networks of care arise. Women who cook for those too weak to prepare meals, older children who tend to younger siblings, strangers who drag the sick to local infirmaries. In the absence of effective medicine, these small acts of communal support are as important as any cure. As the city continues its relentless hum, cholera advances quietly. Streets that appeared merely grim are now battlegrounds, with invisible forces claiming lives in ways the people cannot comprehend. It is a disease that punishes the poor, confounds the learned, and reshapes the very fabric of everyday life. And the question that haunts every mother, father, and child lingers. In a city so vast, so dense, and so neglected, who will survive, and who will be taken before help can arrive? The fog of uncertainty settles over St. Giles once more. You glance down an alley, noticing the faint figure of a man hunched over a pump, water spilling from the handle into the already murky puddle. You wonder, as everyone in this neighborhood must, could the very water we depend upon to live be the agent of our destruction? And if so, who will be next? As days pass in St. Giles, the disease makes its presence increasingly known, creeping from house to house, alley to alley. Unlike smallpox or influenza, which leave their mark visibly, cholera is more insidious. You cannot see it, you cannot smell it except through the indirect stench of human neglect. Families begin to whisper in corners about the Blue Death, a name that hints at the ashen skin, sunken eyes, and cold extremities of the afflicted. And yet, there is still little understanding of how the disease travels. Edith Tanner wakes one morning to find little Thomas listless in bed, his cheeks hollow, his eyes glassy. Panic grips her chest. She recalls the stories she has overheard. Children disappearing overnight, men falling in the streets, neighbors carried away on makeshift stretchers. There is no doctor available immediately. Even if one were, treatments are rudimentary at best. Bloodletting, opium, mustard poultices, or the occasional herbal remedy are all that the sick might receive. None of these interventions are reliably effective, and the fastest-acting victims rarely make it to medical care. Across the city, similar stories unfold in grim repetition. In Whitecapel, families keep vigil over the dying. In Southwark, warehouses full of the poor become impromptu hospitals. There is no central coordination. Each household navigates the epidemic as best it can. Letters from the better off circulate among friends and family, warning of contaminated water and urging caution, but these admonitions often arrive too late. The disease moves faster than advice. One of the most striking features of the outbreak is its randomness. Wealth offers some protection. The rich can avoid contaminated pumps, pay for clean water delivered to their homes, or retreat to the countryside. But in the backstreets, proximity alone dictates vulnerability. If your neighbor falls ill, the risk to your family skyrockets. The very architecture of poverty, the crammed tenements, shared latrines, narrow streets, magnifies the danger. In this way, the city itself becomes a participant in the spread, a silent accomplice to a killer no one fully understands. Amid the chaos, certain figures attempt to intervene. John Snow, a physician already working in the field of anesthesia, begins to notice patterns. He maps deaths in Soho and observes clusters around particular water pumps. His is a methodical, almost obsessive study, recording each death, tracing water sources, interviewing families. At a time when the prevailing miasma theory dominates medical thinking, his insistence on a waterborne cause seems almost absurd. Yet in the hushed corners of laboratories and coffeehouses, some begin to take note. The question emerges: could meticulous observation and documentation, rather than superstition, hold the key to survival? Back in St. Giles, Edith does what she can to protect her children. She boils water, though her supply is limited and fuel expensive. She washes her hands, though cold water and poor soap make the effort only partially effective. Her neighbors watch, some with curiosity, others with scorn. Some insist that cholera is divine punishment, a moral test for the poor. Others argue that leaving children exposed is reckless. No consensus exists. Daily survival requires judgment calls made with incomplete information, an unenviable responsibility for any parent. The social consequences of cholera are equally profound. Fear spreads faster than the disease itself. Markets thin out as vendors abandon neighborhoods. Streets, once teeming with life, grow eerily quiet as families barricade themselves indoors. Rumors circulate that the poor are carriers of death, fueling distrust and sometimes outright hostility among neighbors. You notice that communities fracture, even as they are forced to rely on one another. Acts of compassion, sharing a loaf of bread, lending a bucket, become delicate negotiations, tempered by fear. Hospitals and infirmaries, already overcrowded, begin to fill with patients, most of them beyond hope. Nurses, often young women from modest backgrounds, work long hours, their own health compromised by exhaustion and exposure. Doctors struggle with ineffective treatments, moving from patient to patient, performing procedures whose efficacy is largely unknown. There are no antibiotics, no intravenous fluids, no vaccines. Treatment is largely palliative, keeping the patient comfortable while nature takes its inexorable course. Witnessing these deaths becomes routine, and yet the emotional toll is immense. Even the most stoic caregivers are haunted by the sudden collapse of children, the rapid deterioration of otherwise healthy adults, and the futility of their efforts. For families like the Tanners, the epidemic alters every aspect of daily life. Food preparation becomes a carefully timed ritual. Water must be boiled if possible, pots sterilized over fire, leftovers monitored for spoilage. Laundry, once done only once a week or less, becomes urgent, a desperate attempt to prevent contamination. Sleeping arrangements are adjusted, with siblings separated when possible, though in crowded homes, these measures offer only limited protection. Every task is shadowed by the knowledge that a single misstep could result in death. Despite all precautions, tragedy strikes. Thomas's condition worsens rapidly. His skin takes on a bluish-gray hue, his body becomes stiff, and diarrhea and vomiting rob him of fluid faster than Edith can replenish it. Desperation drives her to seek help from a local doctor, but the visit is brief and clinical. The physician offers some herbal concoction and an admonition to keep the child hydrated. He leaves quickly to attend to other families, each facing the same crisis. Edith returns home, clutching the small bottle, praying that it might do more than soothe. Hours pass. The child's breathing becomes shallow, labored. Outside, the city carries on with its indifferent hum. The Thames glimmers under a low sun, barges moving slowly, smoke rising in hazy columns. In wealthier parts of the city, tea houses fill with patrons, unaware of the mortality unfolding only a few miles away. In St. Giles, death is a quiet but persistent visitor, moving door to door. The people of the neighborhood develop a grim rhythm, learning to spot the early signs of infection, to isolate the sick, to grieve quickly before returning to survival mode. The broader consequences of cholera are only beginning to be felt. Authorities start to take notice, though often reluctantly. Newspapers report outbreaks, but stories are fragmented and sometimes sensationalized, focusing on panic rather than patterns. The public slowly confronts the idea that modern urban life carries inherent risks that had been largely invisible before the industrial boom. Questions of sanitation, public health infrastructure, and urban planning begin to enter conversations that had previously been dominated by trade, politics, and entertainment. Yet, even as some solutions start to emerge, many questions remain. Is it enough to clean streets? Can water alone be relied upon if the source is contaminated? What measures are reasonable for families who are barely surviving on a daily basis? The tension between survival and knowledge, between instinct and scientific understanding, becomes the central drama of life in Victorian London. As night falls over St. Giles, Edith sits by Thomas's bed, her children huddled close. The house is dimly lit by a single candle, the flickering flame casting long shadows across walls streaked with smoke and soot. Outside, the streets are quiet, though the occasional cough or cry reminds the inhabitants that the city itself is restless. You sense, if you look closely, that the real struggle is not just against cholera, but against a system and an environment that makes survival precarious. The disease continues its silent march. Mapping and observation hint at patterns, but the immediate threat is intimate and personal. Every drop of water carries the possibility of death. Every touch could transmit the invisible killer. And so the question hangs in the air. How does a community survive when the very elements of life, water, shelter, proximity to others, become potential agents of destruction? By the time the third week of the outbreak arrives, the toll is unmistakable. St. Giles, once alive with the hum of children, the shuffle of laborers, and the calls of street vendors, is eerily subdued. The alleys that offered fleeting glimpses of life now bear quiet testimony to loss. Families huddle indoors, doors bolted against intrusion, faces pale and tense. Each new cough, each sudden collapse, is a reminder of the disease's unrelenting reach. Edith Tanner sits beside Thomas's small bed, her hands trembling as she tries to coax water into him. The herbal concoction from the doctor lies untouched on the table, a futile attempt at treatment. Her other children cling to her skirts, sensing danger though unable to name it. Hours stretch into days as she monitors him, noting every shallow breath, every shiver, every gasp. The world outside continues its indifferent rhythm. The smoke from chimneys curls upward, distant bells toll for routine, but within these walls, time feels suspended, each moment weighted with dread. The disease shows no mercy. Thomas's condition worsens, and despite Edith's desperate efforts, he succumbs quietly one night. The grief is immediate and raw, yet there is no time for mourning. The neighborhood has lost too many too quickly. Funerals are brief, often unattended, carried out with urgency in overcrowded cemeteries. Death, so intimate in its cruelty, becomes an accepted, though bitter, part of daily life. For the living, survival requires both emotional restraint and constant vigilance. Edith weeps alone, her sorrow a private act, hidden from neighbors who are themselves preoccupied with illness, scarcity, and fear. Yet even amidst the despair, small acts of resilience emerge. Neighbors bring food, water, or blankets. Older children help care for the sick. Local women form informal networks, sharing knowledge about safer water sources, hygiene practices, and herbal remedies, however limited their effectiveness. In the absence of formal institutions capable of managing the outbreak, community solidarity becomes a crucial lifeline. These acts, though seemingly ordinary, shape the way residents experience the epidemic. They are the difference between complete devastation and a fragile continuation of life. Across London, the outbreak follows similar patterns. John Snow's painstaking data collection begins to reveal something remarkable. Clusters of cholera cases surround particular pumps. Slowly, a theory emerges. The water itself may be the vehicle of the disease. While the idea challenges conventional wisdom, the miasma theory, which attributes illness to bad air, Snow's observations offer hope. Knowledge, he demonstrates, may yet intervene in survival, even if only incrementally. For the residents of St. Giles, however, such revelations are not immediately helpful. Survival remains a day-to-day struggle, and the question of contaminated water is not a matter of theory, but of immediate life or death. The city authorities, after mounting pressure from newspapers and concerned citizens, begin to act, though with mixed effectiveness. Pumps identified as sources of infection are closed, streets are cleaned, and public health boards begin rudimentary planning. But these measures arrive slowly, often after significant loss of life. In some neighborhoods, residents are skeptical or unaware, and cholera continues its deadly course. You begin to see a pattern that will repeat in future epidemics. Urban infrastructure, public policy, and scientific observation often lag behind the speed of human suffering. For ordinary people, the crisis leaves indelible marks. Survivors like Edith carry both grief and practical knowledge. She understands now the importance of boiling water, monitoring hygiene, and observing early signs of illness. Yet she also knows the limits of individual action. Structural poverty, crowded living conditions, and lack of official support mean that the next outbreak or even the next wave of the same disease will strike with the same devastating force. Resilience in these circumstances is personal, immediate, and hard one, but it is fragile. In the aftermath of the outbreak, the streets of St. Giles slowly return to a muted rhythm. Life does not return to normal. There is no simple recovery. Those who survived live with the memory of neighbors and family lost, the realization that survival is often a matter of circumstance rather than virtue or effort, and a new awareness of the invisible dangers of urban life. Children grow up faster, learning lessons in mortality and hygiene that older generations may never have had to confront. The neighborhood, scarred but enduring, bears witness to both human fragility and resilience. Historically, the cholera outbreaks of the 1830s, including the devastating events in St. Giles, catalyzed changes in public health. Over time, authorities began to understand the importance of clean water, proper sewage systems, and regulated urban planning. John Snow's work laid the foundation for modern epidemiology. Yet, for the residents living through the epidemic, these lessons were often invisible, delayed, or abstract. The human cost, the private grief, the daily struggle, the invisible presence of disease was immediate and unforgiving. For you, imagining the streets of St. Giles, the story offers a stark lesson in the intersection of environment, poverty, and disease. Survival is not merely a matter of will or morality. It depends on resources, knowledge, and sometimes chance. You are reminded that history is not only shaped by grand political events or famous figures, but by the mundane realities of daily life. Access to water, the quality of housing, the labor of those who clear streets, and the vigilance of those who tend to the sick. And perhaps most striking of all is the fragility of human existence in the face of unseen forces. Cholera, an invisible agent of death, reminds you that ordinary life is perpetually intertwined with risk. Every moment of survival is a small victory, every act of care a defiance against the indifferent pressures of circumstance. The streets of St. Giles will see future epidemics, future crises, and future resilience. But for those who lived through this outbreak, the memory of the disease and the children lost along the way leaves a permanent mark. As you leave the back streets of St. Giles in your imagination, you can almost hear the faint echoes of footsteps, the distant cries of the afflicted, and the quiet determination of those who survived. It is a reminder that history is lived in the mundane, in the ordinary struggles of life and death, and that sometimes the most significant stories are the ones that almost no one notices. Story 2. Bread and Grime. The daily life of a Victorian factory child. Imagine yourself waking before sunrise, in a cramped, dimly lit room, sharing space with siblings who jostle for the little warmth the fire can provide. You are no older than 8 or 9, but the responsibilities pressing on your small shoulders make you feel much older. In the distance, the shrill whistle of the factory signals the start of another day, a sound that, for you, has come to define both rhythm and dread. In 1840s Manchester, the industrial heart of Victorian England, children like you make up a significant portion of the workforce. Your job is to operate a spinning mule, tend the machines, sweep the floors, or crawl beneath looms to collect fallen fibers. Hours are long, 12, 14, sometimes 16 in a single day. Breaks are rare, meals hurried, and any sign of fatigue or error is met with punishment: the strap, the cane, or relentless verbal berating. The factory itself is a cavern of noise and motion. Steam engines thrum constantly, sending vibrations through the wooden floors and rattling your teeth. Cotton fibers float in the air like pale snow, coating your skin, hair, and lungs, making every breath slightly more laborious than the last. Floors are slick with oil and dust. Accidents are inevitable. You watch older children lose fingers, sustain burns, or collapse from exhaustion, knowing that if you falter even slightly, you could join them in the ranks of the injured. For many children, the day begins not with breakfast but with the struggle to even reach the factory on time. Streets are muddy and treacherous. Coal dust and horse manure line the lanes. Shoes, if you have them at all, are thin and inadequate, offering little protection from frost or filth. Your mother, herself worn from long hours of domestic labor or small trade, urges you forward with a mixture of pride and resignation. There is no debate. Work is not optional, it is survival. Inside, the hierarchy is rigid. The overseers patrol constantly, eyes sharp for mistakes. A child who falters is publicly chastised, sometimes whipped. Older workers are both mentors and enforcers, passing down skills and occasionally cruelty. Machines are indifferent masters. They will continue to turn, spin, and cut regardless of your small body pressed against their moving parts. Awareness of danger is constant, yet there is little time to reflect. Attention must be relentless. Meals are eaten on the go. Bread, often stale, is accompanied by thin gruel or tea, barely enough to sustain energy. Children trade scraps when they can, but scarcity is universal. You learn to pace yourself, to conserve strength, to hide hunger when overseers are near. Lunchtimes are brief pauses, but they are also opportunities for social bonds. Whispered stories, quick games, and minor rebellions, small acts of humanity in an otherwise dehumanizing environment. Yet despite the hardship, there are moments of resilience and ingenuity. You notice patterns in the machinery, ways to make the work slightly easier, or shortcuts that allow for a few stolen minutes of rest. You exchange tips with peers: how to sweep faster, how to reach a stubborn thread, how to avoid detection while sneaking a bite of bread. These small strategies, learned out of necessity, teach lessons in adaptation, cooperation, and survival that adults might overlook. Health is a constant concern. Lungs are burdened by dust, eyes strain from dim lighting, muscles ache from repetitive motions, and exhaustion becomes a permanent companion. Injuries are frequent. Some children endure minor wounds, others suffer lifelong disabilities. Yet despite the danger, attendance is non-negotiable. The Industrial Revolution values output over safety, and the machinery cares little for human fragility. Social life is shaped entirely by the factory schedule. Evenings, if they exist, are spent on chores, homework, or caring for younger siblings. Play is brief, often improvised in alleyways or empty lots, and rarely occurs under the watchful eyes of adults. Childhood, in its traditional sense, is truncated. Education, when available, is minimal, usually confined to church-run schools or Sunday lessons. For most, literacy and numeracy are tools for survival rather than enrichment. The psychological toll is equally severe. You learn early that disobedience brings pain, that mistakes are costly, and that life can change in a single misstep. Fear becomes a constant companion, yet you adapt, internalizing discipline and endurance as virtues. Some children develop remarkable resilience, finding small joys in work or companionship. Others become withdrawn, numbed by the relentless grind. Both paths are attempts to navigate an unforgiving system. Family life is simultaneously a source of support and strain. Parents may urge obedience to ensure wages continue, siblings compete for attention and survival, and small disputes can escalate into significant conflicts when stress runs high. Every domestic interaction is colored by scarcity, fatigue, and the looming demands of factory life. Yet family bonds, however fraught, remain crucial lifelines in a world that offers little mercy. The broader society rarely intervenes. Reform movements exist, but change is slow. Reports by social reformers like Charles Dickens or Edwin Chadwick highlight the harsh realities of child labor, yet legislative protections are limited and inconsistently enforced. The Factory Acts of the 1830s and 1840s begin to regulate working hours and conditions for children, but enforcement is uneven, especially in smaller, privately owned mills. Your life day-to-day is largely shaped by the immediate environment, the machinery, the overseers, and the relentless rhythm of labor. For you, there is little room for reflection. Sleep comes in brief, shallow segments. Your dreams are fragmented by the fear of lateness or injury. You wake before dawn, your small body aching, ready to enter the factory once more. And yet, amidst the drudgery, there is an odd sense of accomplishment. Completing a task without error, helping a sibling, surviving another day, these are victories, however small. They are reminders that even in the harshest conditions, human agency persists, and survival is both a skill and an act of quiet defiance. As the day draws to a close, you glance around the factory floor. Dust settles slowly over machinery, a pale haze in the dim light. Your peers shuffle toward the exits, exhausted but obedient, returning to homes that offer warmth, food, and fleeting comfort. The cycle will repeat tomorrow. Every day is a mixture of endurance, strategy, and vigilance. The lessons you learn here about adaptation, perseverance, and community will last a lifetime, even if they are earned through suffering. And yet, despite all your efforts, the future feels uncertain. Machines will continue to turn, overseers will continue to enforce, and society's indifference may leave you vulnerable to accidents, illness, or exhaustion. Survival is never guaranteed, and childhood itself is a fragile construct, easily destroyed by forces beyond your control. The days in the factory begin to blur together, each indistinguishable from the last. You wake before dawn, your body already aching from the previous day's labor. Your small hands are raw from gripping wooden shafts and twisting levers. Your back aches from bending over machinery that seems almost indifferent to your presence. The overseer's whistle is sharp, slicing through the foggy morning air. Instantly, you are alert, moving with a practiced precision born of months or years of repetition. Accidents are never far away. Just yesterday, a boy your age lost 2 fingers in the spinning machinery when his sleeve caught unexpectedly. You were standing nearby, frozen as the overseer's hand descended, punishing the boy for carelessness, even as the machine tore his flesh. There was no time for grief. The rest of the children were herded into position, the factory demanding production above all else. You learn quickly that fear is as necessary as skill, the fear of injury, of reprisal, and of falling behind. Each movement becomes deliberate, every step measured, as if the smallest error could be fatal. Health deteriorates rapidly under these conditions. You inhale clouds of cotton dust that cling to lungs and throat. Coughing becomes routine, a constant companion. Eyes sting from dim lighting and dust. Skin cracks from heat, cold, and grime. Nutrition is minimal: stale bread, thin gruel, and the occasional tea, but there is no choice. Hunger gnaws constantly, even when your hands are steady, and exhaustion threatens to collapse your body at any moment. Sickness is particularly dangerous, for if you falter, you are considered weak and may lose your place in the factory entirely. Survival demands endurance beyond your years. The social environment in the factory is a strange mixture of hierarchy, cooperation, and quiet rebellion. Older children enforce rules on younger ones, passing down skills but also instilling discipline. Friendships form in fleeting moments. Shared glances across the floor, whispered warnings about machine hazards, stolen bites of bread. These bonds are essential. They are the human thread that helps you survive the relentless grind. And yet, rivalry is inevitable. Scraps of food, positions at the most manageable machines, or fleeting attention from overseers can ignite tension, reminding you that cooperation and competition exist simultaneously in this fragile ecosystem. The psychological strain is relentless. Sleep, already minimal, is haunted by nightmares of machinery, punishment, or lost colleagues. You learn to mask fear with composure, exhaustion with diligence. Small triumphs, a perfectly wound spool of thread, a momentary reprieve from the overseer's gaze offer brief respite, but they are fleeting. In this environment, even minor miscalculations can have lasting consequences. A twisted ankle on slick floors, burns from hot machinery, or exposure to harmful chemicals used in textile processing. Each injury carries both immediate danger and the threat of long-term disability. Outside the factory, life is scarcely easier. Streets are muddy, crowded, and polluted. Housing is cramped. Families of 6 or 7 often occupy a single room. Sanitation is poor. Diseases such as typhoid, cholera, and smallpox are constant threats. Your parents are also laborers, working long hours to secure minimal wages. Domestic responsibilities, fetching water, tending to younger siblings, preparing meals add to the exhaustion. Even moments that might be considered rest are fraught with labor, leaving little time for play or education. Education, where it exists, is a tenuous privilege. Sunday schools or charitable institutions offer literacy and numeracy, but attendance is inconsistent, often interrupted by illness or exhaustion. You may know your letters and numbers, but practical survival dominates your days. Lessons are learned in the factory, timing movements to avoid accidents, navigating hierarchies, enduring pain, conserving energy. These skills, though uncelebrated, are essential for life. Despite the hardships, you observe resilience everywhere. Some children become adept at navigating machinery, anticipating its dangers. Others develop small economies within the factory, trading scraps, sharing food, helping injured peers. Family units adjust to maximize survival. Older siblings tend younger ones, parents ration wages, and everyone contributes to an intricate balance between endurance and practicality. You begin to understand that survival is not merely physical, it is social, strategic, and psychological. Yet the environment continues to claim victims. Illness and accidents are constant reminders of vulnerability. A sudden collapse on the floor, a finger lost, or a child carried off by sickness are grim truths that cannot be ignored. The factory's indifference to suffering teaches harsh lessons about mortality, resilience, and adaptation. You recognize that in such conditions, the margin between survival and catastrophe is extraordinarily narrow. As the industrial city expands, these patterns are replicated across England. Manchester is not unique. Factories in Leeds, Birmingham, and Glasgow operate under similar principles. Children as young as 6 work alongside adults, their labor integral to the success of the burgeoning textile industry. Economic necessity drives this system. Families depend on every wage earner, and the societal assumption is that childhood is secondary to production. Reformers and critics exist, journalists, social investigators, and philanthropists, but change is slow and often resisted by factory owners, for whom child labor is not cruelty but economic imperative. You begin to see that survival in this environment requires more than endurance. It requires ingenuity. Simple strategies, sliding under a loom without getting noticed, bending slightly to avoid a machine's moving parts, packing yourself to conserve energy become essential skills. These are lessons that adults often overlook, but for a child, they may determine life or death. Each day is a test not just of labor, but of observation, adaptation, and strategic thinking. Yet even with these strategies, fear and exhaustion never fully dissipate. You remain aware that a single misstep could have consequences that extend far beyond the factory: permanent injury, loss of employment, or being sent home to starve. The stress becomes almost invisible, internalized as routine. For many children, it shapes character, resilience, and perspective on the world, but it also carries the risk of psychological scars, an awareness of fragility, and a pervasive sense of vulnerability that will follow them into adulthood. In this environment, childhood itself is paradoxical. It is both truncated and intensified. You experience labor, danger, and responsibility far beyond your years, yet also form deep bonds, develop quick reflexes, and acquire survival strategies that will last a lifetime. The line between victim and survivor is thin. Each day offers opportunities for endurance, ingenuity, and small victories that can mean the difference between life and death. And so, as another factory whistle pierces the dawn, you rise once more, weary but determined. The machinery waits, the overseer watches, and the city continues its relentless churn. Outside, the streets are filled with other children like you, each navigating the demands of survival, each learning to endure, to strategize, to persevere. The factory looms over the streets as dawn breaks, a relentless presence that has defined your life for as long as you can remember. Years of early rising, repetitive labor, and constant vigilance have carved their mark into your body. Small hands calloused, back bent, eyes strained. You move through the machinery with practiced precision, knowing instinctively when to bend, when to pause, and when to watch for the overseer's gaze. You have survived accidents, illnesses, and the endless pressure to perform, but survival does not erase the cost. Accidents continue to remind everyone of their fragility. A friend collapses near the spinning mules, gasping for breath, the overseer shouting instructions that mean little in the moment. Another child burns a hand on a hot press, crying silently as the overseer moves on, indifferent. These events are not exceptions. They are part of the rhythm of factory life. You learn to respond quickly, to help peers without drawing attention, and to calculate risks with each movement. Each day is a delicate negotiation between skill, endurance, and luck. For those who survive, life outside the factory is equally demanding. Homes are small, overcrowded, and poorly ventilated. Nutrition is minimal, sometimes non-existent, and exposure to disease is constant. Cholera, typhoid, smallpox, and influenza haunt the streets and alleys, claiming lives indiscriminately. Even when the factory day ends, survival continues at home, fetching water, preparing food, and caring for younger siblings. Rest is brief and often shallow, a luxury rarely afforded. Yet amid the hardship, moments of resilience emerge. Older children act as surrogate parents, helping younger siblings navigate both factory work and domestic labor. Communities form informal support networks, shared meals, advice on safe routes to school, or warnings about dangerous machinery. Children develop a remarkable ability to strategize, conserving energy, coordinating movements to avoid injury, and finding small ways to ease the drudgery. These strategies are learned through observation, trial and error, and cooperation, a survival toolkit honed under pressure. Historical records show the human cost of this labor. Investigators such as Charles Dickens, in works like Oliver Twist, and social reformers like Edwin Chadwick, documented the toll on children: stunted growth, chronic illness, deformities, and psychological trauma. Mortality rates among child laborers were higher than among their peers who remained at home, a grim indicator of the system's brutality. Yet within this suffering, these children developed skills, resilience, and social networks that would help some navigate life later, albeit shaped irrevocably by hardship. Reform slowly arrives, shaped by outrage, observation, and legislation. The Factory Acts of 1833, 1844, and beyond begin to regulate working hours, minimum age, and safety measures. Schools open in limited form, providing basic literacy and numeracy. Inspectors wander factory floors, ensuring that children are not pushed beyond legal limits. Yet enforcement is inconsistent, and families often bend rules to survive. Survival remains a mix of compliance, cunning, and luck. For you, survival has become a daily negotiation. Every movement in the factory, every rationed meal, every stolen moment of rest is part of an intricate balancing act. Each small victory, a day completed without injury, a child fed, a machine correctly tended reinforces the sense of agency. Even in an environment designed to suppress individuality and autonomy, human resourcefulness persists. You learn lessons in endurance, observation, and cooperation that are as vital as any formal education. The experience shapes not only the body but the mind. Childhood is compressed and accelerated, teaching early responsibility, emotional control, and strategic thinking. Some children emerge resilient, their skills and awareness translating into adulthood as practical competence and social cunning. Others carry deep scars, both physical and psychological, reflecting the relentless pressures they endured. Life trajectories are profoundly altered. A child who survives these years may enter adulthood with hardened determination, acute survival instincts, and a deep awareness of the precarity of life. Yet even as some endure, others do not. The machinery, the relentless pace, illness, and exhaustion claim their share. Funerals are brief and understated, often attended only by immediate family, the community too burdened to linger. Grief is private, managed silently, as survival pressures demand immediate focus on the living. You learn that life is tenuous, and that resilience is not merely admirable, it is essential. Socially, the consequences ripple outward. Communities adapt to protect and support young workers. Families develop strategies to maximize income while minimizing loss. Reform efforts, once distant, gain traction as chroniclers, philanthropists, and government officials highlight the human cost. Slowly, the system changes, though often imperfectly, and the stories of children laboring under harsh conditions provide moral and empirical evidence for these efforts. For you, the lessons are personal and enduring. You learn that resilience, adaptability, and observation are crucial for survival. You understand the fragility of life, the importance of community, and the necessity of planning even under oppressive conditions. You also recognize the systemic forces at work: poverty, industrial demand, and social neglect, all of which shape not only your labor but your future prospects. As the sun sets over Manchester, the factory's hum quiets momentarily, leaving only the echo of your footsteps and the faint smell of dust and oil. You reflect on the months or years of labor, on the friends lost and the lessons learned, on the narrow margins between survival and catastrophe. Despite everything you have endured, adapting to circumstances that would have crushed many adults, your body bears the marks of labor, your mind the sharp edge of experience. Survival in this environment is both triumph and burden. Historically, the lives of children like you catalyzed change. Public awareness grew, leading to stricter regulations, school provisions, and a gradual reduction in exploitative child labor. The Industrial Revolution depended on these small hands, yet it also illuminated the human cost of progress. Victorian society would eventually confront the moral and practical consequences of child labor, though for many, these reforms arrived only after decades of hardship. As you leave the factory floor for the evening, you glimpse the streets that will carry you home, narrow, muddy, and crowded, yet alive with small communities, friendships, and acts of resilience. Each step reminds you that history is not only written by kings, politicians, and generals, but by ordinary children navigating extraordinary challenges. Every day survived is an act of defiance against circumstances, a testament to human endurance and ingenuity. Story 3: The Lamplighter's Lament, Nights in a Gaslit City. The streets of London at dusk take on a curious, otherworldly glow. Smoke from chimneys rises into the fatting sky, mingling with fog that seems to thicken as the evening deepens. For most Londoners, This is the hour to return home, to finish meals, to light fires, and to brace for the chill of night. But for the lamplighter, it is only the beginning of another long, often solitary vigil. In 1860, gaslighting has transformed the city. Streets, previously cloaked in darkness and danger, now glow with a steady, flickering warmth. Gas lamps stretch along roads, across squares, and along the Thames embankments, casting long shadows and illuminating every puddle and stone. For the lamplighter, a man like Thomas Hargreaves, these lamps are both livelihood and burden. Each evening he begins his rounds, carefully inspecting each lamp before striking a taper to ignite the gas. The work is painstaking, repetitive, and often physically demanding. Thomas carries his equipment: a long, extendable pole tipped with a small flame, a ladder for lamps just out of reach, and a satchel with spare wicks. His footsteps echo on the cobblestones as he navigates narrow alleys and broad avenues alike. Each lamp must be lit carefully. Too much gas, and the lamp may flare and sputter; too little, and it will fail to illuminate the streets. Accuracy is vital for the safety of pedestrians, horse-drawn carriages, and children returning from work or errands. Every mistake is noticed. Though punishment is rarely corporal, failure is mostly financial or professional, a risk to his meager wages. The work is not glamorous. Streets are often dirty, slick with mud, refuse, or water from overflowing drains. Rats scurry in alleys, attracted by scraps left from markets and homes. The smell of coal smoke, horse manure, and rotting food accompanies Thomas's nightly journey. Despite the steady glow of gas lamps, danger lurks. Pickpockets, drunks, and thieves take advantage of the dark corners beyond the circle of light. On foggy nights, visibility is low, and accidents, falls, collisions with carts, or even scalding from the gas itself are constant threats. Yet there is a rhythm to the work, a steady cadence that becomes almost meditative. Thomas moves from lamp to lamp, each a small victory against darkness. The flickering light transforms alleys into shifting shadows, and the reflections in puddles create illusions of movement, of lives intersecting in quiet ways. For the lamplighter, these nights are a strange blend of solitude and observation. He watches the city breathe. Children running home from school, servants hurrying along, shopkeepers locking doors, street hawkers packing away their wares. Every detail is noted, for survival and professional diligence demand attention. The job also comes with social isolation. Lamplighters rarely interact with others during their rounds. Companions are few, conversation limited. They must remain vigilant, alert to hazards, and precise in their work. Unlike factory laborers or dockworkers who may share tasks in crowded spaces, lamplighters move alone, often covering miles in a single night. Cold winds whip through the streets, and winter nights are particularly harsh. Frost stiffens joints, dampness chills to the bone, and the constant walking provides little opportunity for rest. Families of lamplighters live modestly. Wages are low, barely enough to secure simple meals and shelter. Meals often consist of bread, cheese, or stew, supplemented by seasonal vegetables when available. Children are expected to contribute, sometimes helping with small chores or running errands. Domestic life is constrained by the lamplighter's schedule. Leaving home at dusk and returning well after midnight, he is absent from meals, celebrations, and the ordinary rhythms of family life. Solitude is both a requirement of the job and a consequence of necessity. Despite the hardships, there is pride in the work. Lamplighters illuminate the city, allowing commerce, travel, and social life to continue safely after dark. They are guardians of visibility, ensuring that the streets remain navigable and that the nocturnal dangers are mitigated, however imperfectly. Their labor is often overlooked by the public. Few consider the human effort required to maintain the lamps, the careful inspection, the miles of walking, or the knowledge of machinery required to operate the gas lines safely. Technical skill is essential. Each lamp contains delicate mechanisms, valves, burners, and wicks that require maintenance. Mismanagement can lead to explosions or gas leaks, endangering both the lamplighter and the public. Thomas must constantly assess the performance of each lamp, adjust the flame, and note any anomalies. Knowledge of the city's gas infrastructure, often labyrinthine and poorly documented, is critical. A single oversight could result in darkness, disruption, or injury. The nights are also long. In summer, darkness arrives late, extending the rounds into the late evening. In winter, freezing temperatures add to the challenge. Thomas learns to conserve energy, balancing speed and accuracy. The physical toll accumulates. Sore feet, stiff muscles, and exhaustion are constant companions. Yet he endures, driven by both necessity and pride in his work. Each street illuminated is a mark of accomplishment, a small assertion of order over chaos. The broader societal context frames this labor. Gas lighting, a relatively new technology, transforms public life in London. Shops stay open later. Theaters host evening performances. Children can travel safely to evening classes. But these benefits are predicated on the invisible labor of lamplighters like Thomas. Society gains comfort and safety, while the laborers shoulder the physical and social cost. It is a reminder of the hidden infrastructure that supports urban life, a human network often unnoticed until disaster or failure occurs. And yet there are hazards beyond the physical. Gas lines leak, explosions are possible. On foggy nights, navigation is treacherous. Robbers and vagrants exploit shadows. Lamplighters are often blamed for failure or accidents, despite conditions beyond their control. Social recognition is minimal. The city enjoys the light without appreciating the human effort. This tension between visibility and invisibility, between value and neglect, defines the lamplighter's experience. As Thomas moves down a particularly narrow alley, a thick fog envelops him. The gas lamps cast muted halos, barely piercing the gray air. He notices a child darting across the street, tripping over a stone, and instinctively rushes forward to help. In moments like these, the lamplighter's role becomes immediate and personal. Not just a worker tending lamps, but a guardian of life in a city that moves at its own rhythm. The faint glow from the lamps reflects on puddles, on cobblestones, and on faces, illuminating both the city and the quiet heroism of those who ensure its safety. And yet, as the night deepens, the question lingers. Can the lamplighter truly protect the city from the unseen dangers that lurk beyond the circle of light? Can human vigilance ever match the complexity and unpredictability of an urban environment that teems with risk, darkness, and human folly? Night after night, the lamplighter walks the same streets, each route familiar yet endlessly unpredictable. Fog curls through alleys, softening the edges of buildings and muting the sound of distant carriage wheels. The cobblestones glisten with rain, and every step carries the potential for slips, trips, or encounters with the city's restless inhabitants. Thomas Hargreaves has learned to move cautiously, scanning the shadows for both hazards and opportunities to help those in need. The work is physically demanding and mentally exhausting, but it is also a performance of skill, endurance, and acute observation. Accidents remain a constant threat. Gas lamps, while a remarkable technological advancement, are temperamental. Wicks can smolder or flare unexpectedly. Valves fail, causing leaks that might ignite with a single spark. Thomas remembers the explosion that rocked Whitechapel the previous winter. A lamp malfunctioned, igniting the surrounding wooden frame and causing panic as pedestrians scattered. Miraculously, no one was killed, but the incident underscored the dangers inherent in seemingly mundane work. A lamplighter's attention must be absolute, for the smallest oversight can have catastrophic consequences. Weather compounds these hazards. In winter, frost and ice cover the streets, turning each alley into a potential trap. Rain saturates clothing and saps energy, while wind threatens to extinguish the taper before a lamp can be lit. Heat in summer is equally oppressive, particularly in cramped areas near the gasworks where fumes mix with coal smoke. Thomas has learned to endure extremes, but fatigue accumulates over weeks and months. Even the strongest bodies succumb to the combination of long hours, exposure, and repetitive labor. The social environment of the streets is no less demanding. Lamplighters encounter a cross-section of Victorian London: errant children, vagrants, thieves, drunken adults, and occasionally a curious or grateful passerby. Interactions are brief, often functional, but they remind the lamplighter that his labor affects real lives. Streets are microcosms of society, where vigilance is essential not just for machinery, but for the safety of the public. Sometimes, Thomas intervenes to prevent a minor accident: a child slipping into a puddle, a carriage hitting a poor pedestrian. But these acts, while vital, go largely unnoticed. The city enjoys the glow, rarely considering the human labor that sustains it. Monotony is another challenge. Hours stretch on as Thomas lights lamp after lamp, his steps echoing off the buildings in a steady rhythm. Physical exertion is only part of the burden. The mind must remain alert despite fatigue, darkness, and cold. The lamplighter becomes attuned to the subtle differences in flame height, gas pressure, and lamp alignment. Patterns in flickering lamps indicate potential mechanical issues, while the quiet hum of the city signals the approach of unusual events. Attention to detail is critical, and lapses are punished by failure, injury, or professional reprisal. Illness is a constant companion. Lamplighters are exposed to the elements every night, walking miles in all conditions. Respiratory infections, frostbite, and fatigue are common, particularly in winter. A lamplighter cannot afford to fall ill. The job requires nightly presence. Even minor ailments slow progress and increase the risk of accidents, both to the worker and the public. Long-term exposure to gas fumes also contributes to chronic respiratory problems, though knowledge of such hazards is limited. Health is a fragile balance, maintained through vigilance, routine, and a stubborn commitment to duty. Economic pressures intensify the burden. Wages are low, often barely enough to feed a family. Families depend on the lamplighter's income, making absenteeism or errors a source of anxiety beyond personal concern. Children may be tasked with errands or domestic labor to supplement the household, leaving little time for rest. Every night completed safely and efficiently is a triumph, but each night also carries the risk of loss: wages docked, lamps damaged, accidents incurred. Survival depends on endurance, skill, and at times luck. The broader urban context reinforces these pressures. Gas lighting transforms city life, enabling night markets, theater performances, and safer streets. Yet these benefits rely on the lamplighter's invisibility. His labor is integral but largely unrecognized. Society enjoys the light but seldom acknowledges the toil, endurance, and risks behind it. The lamplighter's work is both necessary and thankless, a tension that underscores the precariousness of survival in a complex, industrializing city. Despite the isolation and hardships, lamplighters develop strategies for coping. Routes are memorized with almost obsessive precision. Lamps are inspected for early warning signs of malfunction. Physical exertion is managed to conserve energy, balancing the need for efficiency with endurance. Social vigilance is cultivated, observing passers-by, noticing irregular behavior, and intervening quietly when necessary. These skills, refined nightly, allow the lamplighter to navigate both the physical and social landscape of Victorian London. And yet, uncertainty is never far away. Fires, accidents, criminal acts, or mechanical failure can undo hours of careful labor. The human body is fallible. Fatigue undermines judgment. The city itself is unpredictable, a complex organism of shadow, sound, and movement. For Thomas and his peers, survival is an ongoing negotiation between skill, endurance, and circumstance, where every night presents new challenges. In the quiet moments between lamps, Thomas reflects on the strange duality of his work. He illuminates the streets, enabling commerce, social interaction, and safety, yet remains largely unseen. His labor is essential but invisible, and recognition is rare. The streets glow, but the lamplighter himself remains in the shadows. There is pride in this hidden responsibility, yet it carries with it a constant awareness of fragility. One misstep, one exhausted moment, could result in disaster for himself or others. And as the fog thickens and the final lamps are lit for the night, a subtle question remains, echoing through the alleys and over the Thames. Can a city's safety ever truly depend on the endurance and vigilance of solitary individuals? Or does the very reliance on invisible labor expose the city to inevitable danger, waiting silently in the darkness beyond the gaslight? Night deepens, thick and impenetrable in places where the fog and shadows conspire to erase the familiar outlines of the city. For Thomas Hargreaves, the lamplighter, the last few lamps on his route present both relief and risk. Each step is deliberate, muscles aching from hours of climbing ladders, carrying equipment and maintaining vigilance. Exhaustion threatens to slow his pace, but he cannot afford to falter. The lives of pedestrians, children, and merchants depend on his precision, even if few ever pause to acknowledge it. A sudden flare of gas catches his attention. A lamp near a market stall sputters, the flame trembling in the wind. Thomas knows the risks. A mismanaged flame could ignite nearby wooden structures, barrels of flammable oil, or hay left in storage. He climbs the ladder, adjusting the valve with practiced hands, his pulse quickened not only by the danger but also by the fatigue that creeps into every movement. One wrong adjustment, one miscalculated tilt, and the consequences could be catastrophic. While he works, a child slips into the alley from a side street, chasing a ball that has rolled into the dark. Thomas reaches down just in time, steadying the child and preventing a fall into a puddle filled with cold, stagnant water. It is a fleeting moment, almost unnoticed in the rhythm of the night, but it embodies the lamplighter's dual responsibility, tending the city and safeguarding the people who inhabit it. In these moments, his labor transforms from mechanical to profoundly human, a quiet form of guardianship. Accidents, however, are inevitable. On this particular night, a misjudged step on the ladder causes Thomas to slip. His pole falls, the taper extinguishing midair. He regains balance, heart pounding, and quickly reignites the lamp, but the moment underscores the ever-present danger. In the gaslit city, even small errors carry outsized consequences. The combination of fatigue, weather, and the city's complexity makes every night a negotiation between skill and circumstance. Despite the constant hazards, lamplighters persist. Their labor ensures that streets remain navigable, that commerce can continue, and that residents and travelers can move through the city with relative safety. The public benefits daily from their vigilance, yet few pause to consider the human effort underpinning the glow of the gas lamps. Recognition is scarce, but necessity drives endurance. Each lamp ignited, each hazard averted, is a silent testament to human perseverance. Over time, societal appreciation grows, though indirectly. Engineers, city planners, and policymakers begin to recognize that proper lighting reduces crime, improves social order, and facilitates economic activity. Infrastructure slowly improves. Sturdier lamps, better maintained gas lines, and safer routes are introduced. Lamplighters become less anonymous in official records, though daily survival and attention to detail remain central to their work. The technological network relies entirely on human diligence, and history notes both the illumination and the hidden labor behind it. The psychological weight of the job is profound. Solitude, monotony, and the constant potential for danger shape character as surely as physical labor does. Lamplighters develop acute observational skills, resilience under stress, and the capacity to act decisively in emergencies. They learn to navigate uncertainty, make judgments under fatigue, and cope with isolation. These are lessons forged in dimly lit streets, unheralded but enduring, shaping not only the individual but the functioning of the city itself. As dawn approaches, Thomas completes his rounds. The city is fully illuminated, the streets now quiet save for the occasional early riser or carriage. Exhaustion is complete, yet there is a sense of accomplishment, a subtle pride in having maintained order against the inherent chaos of night. Each lamp stands as proof of skill, endurance, and human vigilance. Without him and others like him, the city would remain dark, unpredictable and dangerous an environment where accidents, crime, and fear thrive. Historically, lamplighters represent a bridge between human labor and technological advancement. Gas lighting transformed Victorian urban life, making streets safer, commerce more viable, and the night less threatening. Yet this transformation relied on human skill, endurance, and courage. The lamplighter's labor, largely invisible, was essential to the functioning of the city. Recognition would come slowly, in the form of municipal records, engineering improvements, and historical documentation, but the work itself remained a quiet, uncelebrated necessity. Reflecting on the night, you begin to understand the delicate balance between human labor and urban infrastructure. Every glowing lamp, every safe passage through fog and darkness, is a result of vigilance, skill, and endurance. The lamplighter's work is both ordinary and extraordinary, a repetitive, solitary task that nonetheless ensures the safety and continuity of daily life for thousands. Without such labor, the city's glow would be fragile, fleeting, and incomplete. And yet the work leaves its mark. Bodies stiffen, lungs strain from cold and gas fumes, and solitude presses on the mind. Some lamplighters endure long careers, carrying the physical and psychological weight of their labor for decades. Others succumb to accidents, illness, or fatigue, a reminder that even the most skilled and careful human effort has limits. The city depends on human vigilance, but human endurance is finite. As you step back from the imagined streets of Victorian London, the glow of gas lamps seems almost magical, yet it is inseparable from human effort, risk, and resilience. The lamplighter's labor is a quiet testament to endurance, to the ability of ordinary people to sustain the extraordinary demands of urban life. It is a reminder that history often unfolds in the small, unnoticed acts of survival and diligence that maintain the rhythm, safety, and order of society. Story 4. Drowning in the Thames. The plight of Victorian water carriers. The Thames flows quietly through London, its dark waters reflecting the fading light of an industrial city. To most Londoners, it is a distant, utilitarian present source of water, transportation, and occasional recreation. For water carriers like Samuel Fenton, it is both livelihood and constant threat, shaping every waking hour with its unpredictability, danger, and demand for physical endurance. In the 1850s, before widespread indoor plumbing and municipal water systems, water carriers were essential to urban life. Homes, businesses, and workshops relied on daily deliveries of fresh water. Samuel begins his day before sunrise, his lungs already laboring in the cold morning air as he hauls heavy pails to the riverbank. Wooden barrels, some weighing over 50 pounds, are lowered into small boats. The work is exhausting, repetitive, and physically punishing, yet vital to the city's functioning. Without carriers, ordinary life would grind to a halt. Cooking, cleaning, and sanitation all depend on the steady flow of water. The Thames itself is unpredictable and dangerous. Currents shift without warning, hidden debris lurks beneath the surface, and the waters are notoriously polluted. Sewage, industrial runoff, and dead animals float in certain stretches, making contact both unpleasant and hazardous. Water carriers risk illness and injury daily. Falling into the river could be fatal, particularly in winter when hypothermia sets in rapidly. Boats are small, sometimes leaky, and navigating the busy river channels demands skill and constant attention. Physical strain dominates every day. Samuel lifts and carries barrels, climbs in and out of boats, and walks miles along the riverbanks to reach customers. Muscles ache, hands blister, and fatigue accumulates over hours of labor. The work is relentless, punctuated only by brief pauses to rest or adjust the load. Rain, sleet, and winter frost add further difficulty, making each step treacherous. Survival depends on strength, coordination, and an intimate understanding of the river and surrounding streets. The social environment is equally challenging. Water carriers occupy a liminal space in Victorian society, essential yet marginalized. They earn wages just sufficient for survival, often living in cramped, poorly ventilated rooms near the river. Competition is constant, with numerous carriers vying for lucrative routes. Encounters with city officials, dockworkers, and residents are frequent, sometimes cooperative, sometimes contentious. Samuel's reputation, skill, and reliability determine his ability to secure steady work, a precarious balance that affects both income and survival. Health risks are constant. Direct contact with polluted water exposes carriers to diseases such as cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. Cuts, abrasions, and exposure to cold and damp conditions weaken the body. Protective clothing is minimal. Thick boots, woolen coats, and gloves offer some relief, but do not eliminate danger. Every day spent transporting water increases the likelihood of injury or illness, yet the work cannot be avoided. The city's survival depends on it. Routine is essential for efficiency. Samuel begins at the river at dawn, filling barrels and loading boats. He follows carefully mapped routes, stopping at designated homes and businesses to deliver water, refill containers, and collect payment. Timing is crucial. Customers expect deliveries at predictable hours, and delays can jeopardize both income and reputation. Each route is memorized, each delivery choreographed, so that the long hours pass with precision. Even so, the river introduces unpredictability. Sudden storms, floating debris, or mechanical failure of boats disrupt carefully planned schedules. The work carries psychological strain as well. The monotony of carrying heavy barrels, the constant vigilance against falling into the river, and the awareness of disease and injury create a persistent mental burden. Water carriers must balance fatigue, attention, and endurance, learning to function under stress without error. Even a momentary lapse, a slip on a wet plank, a misjudged current, or miscalculated balance could result in disaster. Yet within these hardships, a strange pride emerges. Water carriers sustain life itself, ensuring families can cook meals, clean homes, and maintain hygiene in a city teeming with disease. Samuel takes satisfaction in his knowledge of the river's currents, the reliability of his deliveries, and the trust placed in him by his customers. Each completed route is a small triumph against the relentless demands of both city and river. The city itself is dependent yet indifferent. London thrives on the labor of carriers, but little thought is given to their conditions or health. Municipal oversight is minimal, water quality is uneven, wages are low, and accidents are treated as unfortunate but inevitable. The labor is essential, but the recognition is rare, and the risks are borne entirely by the carriers themselves. Even family life is affected. Samuel's wife and children rely on his income, yet his long, irregular hours keep him away from domestic duties. Children often assist where possible, carrying smaller buckets, attending deliveries, or helping at home. Family survival intertwines with professional survival, creating pressures that extend beyond the riverbank and into the home. Exhaustion, responsibility, and vigilance shape not only the worker but the family unit. As night approaches, Samuel returns with empty barrels, muscles aching, and clothes damp from river spray. The day's work is complete, yet the cycle will resume tomorrow. Each day survived is a testament to endurance, skill, and human resilience. The river, ever unpredictable, waits to test him again. Hidden currents, debris, and sudden weather changes remind him that survival is never guaranteed. And as he looks over the dark waters of the Thames, the question lingers. Can the labor of one man truly keep an entire city hydrated and alive? Or is survival in Victorian London a fragile balance, perpetually at the mercy of the river, disease, and circumstance? Story 4. Drowning in the Thames. The plight of Victorian water carriers. The Thames is never still. Currents shift unpredictably, floating debris drifts silently beneath the surface, and mist rises from the water like a warning. For Samuel Fenton, the river is both companion and adversary. Each day he faces not just the weight of barrels, but the invisible pressures of a flowing city, an environment that demands constant vigilance. Misjudging a current or slipping on the slippery planks of a dock could easily tip a boat, spilling precious water, injuring the carrier or worse. Survival depends on knowledge, skill, and endurance, each refined through years of labor. Physical strain dominates his existence. Carrying heavy barrels over long distances causes his back to ache, joints to stiffen, and hands to blister. Even small miscalculations in lifting or balancing loads can result in injury. The city itself offers little reprieve. Streets leading to customers' homes are often muddy, uneven, or slick with waste. Water carriers must adjust their movements constantly, learning how to distribute weight, anticipate shifts, and navigate environmental hazards. The work demands not only strength, but acute bodily awareness and coordination. Weather compounds these challenges. Rain turns streets into rivers of mud. Frost renders planks and stone steps treacherous. Wind threatens to push boats off course, while fog obscures familiar landmarks, turning routine routes into treacherous journeys. Winter is particularly unforgiving. Icy waters threaten hypothermia, and carrying heavy barrels becomes a battle against both load and freezing temperatures. Summer is little easier. Sun and humidity sap energy, and exposure to polluted water carries the risk of disease. The labor is relentless, a continuous negotiation between human endurance and environmental unpredictability. Disease is a persistent threat. Cholera, typhoid, and dysentery run rampant in Victorian London, particularly in areas with poor sanitation. Water carriers constantly in contact with contaminated sources are at elevated risk. Cuts and abrasions sustained while carrying barrels can become gateways for infection. Yet there is no alternative. The city depends on their labor, and households require daily water for cooking, washing, and sanitation. The work is necessary, but the cost is high. Social pressures add another layer of complexity. Water carriers occupy a precarious place in society, essential, yet undervalued. Customers demand punctuality and reliability, dockmasters enforce strict loading schedules, and competition among carriers is fierce. Samuel's reputation determines his livelihood. If he fails to deliver, he risks not only lost income but diminished opportunities for future work. Each day is a careful balance of speed, precision, and social negotiation, a test of both physical and interpersonal skill. Family life is intertwined with labor. Samuel's wife and children depend on his income, but his work keeps him away from home for long hours. Children may assist in small ways, carrying light buckets, helping with deliveries to nearby houses, or tending to domestic tasks while their father is on the river. The family's survival depends on a delicate balance between household labor and paid work, each reinforcing the other. The physical and emotional toll accumulates silently, shaping the rhythm of life in ways few outsiders notice. Despite the hardships, water carriers develop strategies to cope. Samuel knows every bend in the river, every potential hazard, and every shortcut between docks and homes. Routes are memorized with precision, barrels are balanced with care, and boats are navigated with practiced skill. Social intelligence is equally crucial. Anticipating when a customer will be home, avoiding conflicts with other carriers, and negotiating payments all require experience and tact. Survival is not just physical, it is social, mental, and strategic. Yet danger is never far. One misstep, a slippery plank, an overbalanced barrel, a sudden current can endanger life. A fellow carrier fell into the Thames last month, drowning in minutes despite the presence of bystanders. Accidents are reminders that even skill and experience offer no guarantee. The river is indifferent and survival is never assured. Every day completed safely is a triumph, every narrow escape a testament to endurance and attentiveness. Psychologically, the work is taxing. The monotony of hauling barrels, the isolation of long river stretches, and the constant vigilance against hazards shape a person's mind. Carriers develop hyper-awareness, anticipation of risk, and a calm under pressure that outsiders might mistake for stoicism. Yet the constant tension wears on the spirit. Worry for family, fear of accidents, and the knowledge of the river's unpredictability are ever present. Resilience becomes as necessary as strength, and strategy as vital as stamina. At the same time, the work fosters subtle forms of pride and purpose. Every successful delivery ensures that families can cook meals, clean homes, and maintain hygiene. Samuel knows that his labor sustains life, and even in a city indifferent to individual struggle, this knowledge provides motivation. Each barrel safely delivered, each route completed, reinforces a sense of control and competence in an environment governed by unpredictable forces. And yet, despite resilience and skill, the question persists. How long can the human body and spirit endure such relentless labor in a city dependent on its most vulnerable workers? Each day survived is a victory, but each day also carries the silent threat of injury, illness, or exhaustion that could end it all. The Thames flows dark and cold under the moonlight, its surface reflecting the scattered glow of gas lamps and the occasional lantern of a passing boat. For Samuel Fenton, the water carrier, nightfall is not a signal of rest, but a moment of heightened vigilance. Every wave, current, and shadow demands attention. One misplaced step on a dock, one imbalance in a barrel, or one unexpected gust of wind can have fatal consequences. Each delivery is a test of endurance, skill, and constant awareness. On this particular evening, Samuel's journey is unusually treacherous. Rain from the previous day has turned streets into slick channels of mud, and the river is swollen with runoff from upstream. He hauls a barrel over the plank connecting his boat to a customer's home, balancing carefully, muscles screaming from hours of lifting. A sudden slip sends him sprawling, but his reflexes honed through years of labor allow him to steady the barrel and regain footing. The close call leaves him shaken but determined. Survival is both a habit and an act of conscious effort. Others are less fortunate. Reports from the docks recount a young carrier swept off a small boat by a sudden current. Despite bystanders' attempts to rescue him, the river claims the boy within minutes. Incidents like this are painfully common. The Thames is a silent and indifferent arbiter, and human endurance, however remarkable, is finite. Carriers like Samuel live in constant negotiation with this reality, balancing risk against necessity, knowing that every day survived is both fragile and fleeting. Illness, too, is a constant shadow. Cholera, typhoid, and other waterborne diseases stalk the city, claiming lives indiscriminately. Samuel treats every scrape and cut with care, knowing that minor injuries can become gateways for infection. He sees colleagues weakened by repeated exposure to polluted water, some too ill to continue work, others debilitated yet forced by necessity to persevere. Survival requires not only strength but knowledge, caution, and vigilance, as the environment offers no forgiveness. Family life provides both motivation and burden. Samuel's children assist where possible, carrying small buckets or helping at home, while his wife manages domestic duties in his absence. The labor of one individual is inseparable from the survival of the household. Income, water supply, and domestic order all rely on the delicate interplay between river and family. The pressures of work shape not only the individual but the social unit, forging resilience and interdependence. Amid the relentless strain, there are small triumphs. Each successfully delivered barrel is a quiet victory, a reaffirmation of skill and endurance. Customers depend on carriers to sustain daily life, and even if gratitude is rarely expressed, the impact of their labor is profound. Without carriers, homes and businesses would quickly face chaos, meals unprepared, laundry undone, hygiene compromised. Samuel's work, though often invisible, sustains the functioning of the city itself. Over time, incremental improvements appear. Municipal water systems expand, providing cleaner sources and reducing reliance on carriers. Some neighborhoods gain piped water, while improved regulation of river traffic and dock safety slightly mitigates risks. Yet for decades, the city depends on the human endurance of carriers like Samuel. Their labor, physically exhausting and socially undervalued, is essential to the very functioning of Victorian London. The psychological demands are as significant as the physical ones. Constant attention, calculation of risk, and the inevitability of fatigue shape the mind. Carriers develop acute observational skills, calm under pressure, and strategies for navigating danger. These skills, though uncelebrated, are invaluable. They form an invisible infrastructure of knowledge, survival, and resilience, ensuring that a city of millions can continue to function despite the threats posed by its environment and society. As the day ends and Samuel returns to his modest home, the sense of accomplishment is tempered by exhaustion. Limbs ache, hands blister, and lungs burn from exertion, yet the work of the day is done. Water has been delivered, families are supplied, life continues. Survival in a city dependent on both river and labor is a quiet triumph. But tomorrow the cycle will begin again, demanding the same vigilance, endurance, and courage. Historically, water carriers highlight the often invisible labor that underpins urban life. Before widespread plumbing, these individuals ensured survival, hygiene, and continuity in one of the largest cities in the world. Their work connects human endurance to societal function, revealing how ordinary people sustain extraordinary systems. Though largely forgotten, their contributions shaped the daily rhythm of Victorian life, forming the backbone of survival for countless households. Looking over the Thames, Samuel reflects on the paradox of his labor. He is indispensable yet overlooked. He confronts constant danger yet few notice. He sustains life, yet often receives little recognition. In these quiet moments, the river seems to whisper both challenge and reward, danger and triumph. Survival is neither guaranteed nor simple. It is the product of skill, resilience, and persistent human effort. Story 5. The Candle Maker's Secret, Flame and Fume in Victorian Workshops. The narrow alleys of Victorian London are dim even during the day, but inside the candle workshops, darkness is pierced by the faint, flickering light of oil lamps and the occasional spark from a heated wick. For the candle maker, this glow is both guide and hazard. You navigate rooms thick with smoke, the acrid scent of tallow and beeswax filling your nostrils as molten wax simmers in iron cauldrons. Every movement carries risk. A splash of scalding liquid, an accidental spark, or a sudden flare of flame could injure or even kill. Candle making is laborious and precise. Large cauldrons of tallow are heated over open flames, the temperature carefully monitored with experience rather than instruments. Wax must be drawn, poured, and rolled repeatedly to achieve consistent quality. Wicks are cut, fitted, and sometimes coated with chemicals to improve burning. Apprentices and workers move among tables and furnaces, their bodies tense and their attention focused, for a single misstep can ruin hours of labor or cause lasting harm. For young apprentices, the work is particularly grueling. Boys and girls as young as 10 are employed, their small hands able to manipulate wicks and molds with precision. They must endure long hours over hot furnaces, often in poorly ventilated rooms filled with smoke and fumes. Eyes sting, throats ache, and skin becomes coated with a mixture of wax and soot. The work is monotonous but requires constant attention. A lapse in focus can result in burns, chemical exposure, or a flare-up that spreads across the workshop. The air is thick and oppressive. Tallow, when heated, releases fumes that are not only unpleasant but harmful with prolonged exposure. Workers develop chronic coughs, respiratory irritation, and in some cases more serious lung ailments. Skin is perpetually exposed to hot wax, oils, and soot, causing burns, irritation, and infection. Protective gear is minimal. Coarse aprons, gloves when available, and the occasional pair of spectacles for eye protection, though these are rare. Survival depends on endurance, awareness, and careful movement in the workshop. Work is repetitive and time-consuming. Each batch of wax must be processed methodically, melted, poured into molds, cooled, and trimmed. Rolling candles by hand is tedious but necessary for quality. Even the simplest tasks require steady hands, keen eyesight, and patience. Mistakes are costly, wax wasted, wicks ruined, and sometimes dangerous flare-ups caused by mishandling. Efficiency is essential to meet the demands of shops. households, and churches, all of which rely on a steady supply of light. Despite the monotony, there is skill and pride in the craft. Experienced candle makers understand the nuances of wax behavior, the optimal temperature for pouring, and the subtle differences in wick quality. Apprentices watch carefully, learning to read the wax, judge the heat of the cauldron, and sense when a batch is ready. Every perfectly rolled candle is a small triumph, a tangible reward for precision, patience, and endurance. The work is invisible in daily life. Few consider the labor behind the humble flame, but it sustains society's need for light. Hazards extend beyond the workplace. Candle makers are at constant risk of fire, both from their own furnaces and from accidental sparks in the crowded workshops. Soot and dust create flammable environments. Clothing and hair can catch fire easily, and water for emergencies is often limited. These dangers are managed through vigilance, learned skill, and adherence to routines, but risk is never fully eliminated. Every day carries the potential for disaster. Social conditions mirror these physical hazards. Workers are typically poorly paid, and apprentices often work without wages, learning the trade in exchange for labor. Crowded living conditions, inadequate nutrition, and long hours compound the physical demands of the job. Families rely on the wages earned, but survival remains uncertain. Children and adults alike must balance the demands of the workshop with the responsibilities of home life, creating a rhythm dominated by labor, endurance, and vigilance. Workplace hierarchies are strict. Master candle makers supervise apprentices, enforcing discipline and efficiency. Mistakes are punished, sometimes harshly, but the training is rigorous. Learning the craft is both an opportunity and a burden. Skill ensures survival, but the cost is relentless exposure to heat, smoke, and physical strain. Apprentices quickly learn that endurance is as important as dexterity, and that attention to detail may mean the difference between safety and injury. The craft also connects workers to broader society. Churches, households, and businesses all depend on a steady supply of candles. Seasonal demand fluctuates. Winter brings longer nights and higher consumption, requiring careful planning and increased labor. The workers' endurance sustains the rhythm of the city, often unnoticed by those who benefit from the glow of candlelight. There is an unspoken pride in this knowledge, a quiet awareness that their labor enables life to continue after sunset. And yet, despite skill, caution, and endurance, questions remain. How long can the human body endure exposure to heat, smoke, and scalding wax? What happens when accidents, fatigue, or disease strike in a crowded, poorly ventilated workshop? Survival in the candle trade is fragile, dependent on vigilance, experience, and a touch of luck, a precarious balance illuminated only by the flames they themselves produce. The workshop is alive with heat, smoke, and constant motion. Apprentices move between tables, carrying wicks, trimming candles, and stirring molten tallow. The rhythm of labor is relentless. Pour, cool, roll, trim, repeat. There is no respite from the physical demands. Every muscle is engaged in the delicate choreography of survival, back bent, arms lifted, eyes strained against the smoke. Over time, even the most resilient apprentice feels the weight of hours pressing down, an exhaustion that seeps into the bones. Molten wax is unforgiving. One careless moment, a splash, a spill, a momentary lapse in attention can result in severe burns. Scalding tallow sticks to skin, causing blisters and long-lasting scars. Workers learn to move carefully, to anticipate the behavior of the wax as it flows from cauldron to mold. Precision is essential, but it is paired with the constant pressure of pace. Orders must be met, especially in winter when demand for candlelight surges. Mistakes are punished with reprimands or even extra labor. Accidents are often met with a grim combination of indifference and expectation. Air quality adds another layer of strain. Smoke from burning wicks, fumes from heated tallow, and fine soot particles fill the room, penetrating lungs and coating skin. Chronic coughing, sore throats, and eye irritation are common. Apprentices develop hacks to cope, wiping faces with cloths, exhaling through the nose, and packing movements to minimize exposure. Even so, long-term health consequences are inevitable. Respiratory problems, skin infections, and fatigue become a part of everyday life. Survival depends on vigilance and strategy as much as on physical skill. The social environment of the workshop is equally demanding. Master candle makers maintain strict hierarchies, supervising each apprentice and enforcing discipline with precision. Mistakes are not tolerated lightly. Learning the trade is both a privilege and a trial. Knowledge ensures the ability to survive, but the cost is constant exposure to risk. Apprentices must navigate interpersonal pressures, balancing deference to authority with the need to act decisively in moments of danger, such as when a flame flares unexpectedly. Beyond the walls of the workshop, the labor connects workers to the broader functioning of the city. Candlelight sustains churches, homes, theaters, and workshops. Without the labor of candle makers, the city's rhythm falters after sunset. For apprentices like young Thomas Whitaker, this knowledge provides a measure of pride. Each candle produced is a testament to skill, endurance, and human ingenuity. Yet this pride exists alongside the recognition that the work is punishing, dangerous, and largely invisible to those who benefit from it. Economic pressures exacerbate the strain. Wages are low, and apprentices often work without pay, learning the craft through grueling labor. Families depend on income from older siblings or masters' commissions, yet survival is uncertain. Every hour spent over hot cauldrons, every burn endured, is a contribution to the household's well-being. In this way, the boundaries between labor, survival, and family life blur. The workshop is both workplace and training ground, a crucible shaping not only skill but character. Psychologically, the environment is taxing. Monotony, heat, and the ever-present threat of injury demand sustained focus. Workers develop acute concentration, the ability to anticipate danger, and the resilience to continue despite exhaustion. Mistakes can be costly, yet precision is essential. Apprentices learn to balance risk with necessity, endurance with caution. Over time, these lessons become internalized, shaping not only professional competence but also psychological resilience, a survival mechanism forged in heat, smoke, and labor. Seasonal fluctuations create additional stress. Winter brings longer nights, greater demand for candlelight, and heavier workloads. Apprentices work extended hours, sometimes from dawn until late evening, their bodies taxed beyond ordinary limits. Summer is less intense, but heat and humidity amplify the discomfort of hot, smoke-filled rooms. The rhythm of work is dictated by both human need and natural cycles, yet human capacity for endurance is finite. Every day survived is a fragile balance between skill, luck, and physical resilience. Accidents, though minimized through experience, remain a constant threat. Wax fires erupt unexpectedly, splattering molten tallow across tables. Sparks ignite flammable materials. Hands and faces are scalded, and apprentices must respond instantly to contain the danger. These events are part of the routine, yet their unpredictability reinforces the precariousness of survival. Skill reduces risk but does not eliminate it. Endurance sustains life, but vulnerability remains. Despite the harshness, camaraderie develops. Apprentices observe each other, share techniques for handling molten wax, and warn one another of hazards. The hierarchy of the workshop is strict, yet collaboration is a hidden necessity. Survival is not just a personal achievement but a collective effort. The safety and efficiency of the group depend on vigilance, shared knowledge, and subtle coordination, a silent testament to human adaptability under pressure. And yet, a lingering question remains as the night wears on. How long can a body endure this combination of heat, smoke, and physical strain? How many years can an apprentice survive before burns, fatigue, or chronic illness exact a toll that cannot be reversed? The workshop is a crucible of both skill and endurance, and the limits of human resilience are tested daily. The workshop is alive with the low hum of labor, punctuated by the occasional hiss of wax hitting hot water or the crackle of a small flare from a stray spark. For Thomas Whitaker, the apprentice, this is a familiar yet perilous environment. Hours of repetition have honed his skill. He moves with precision, anticipating the flow of molten tallow and adjusting wicks mid-pour. But even expertise cannot erase the dangers that lurk in the heat and smoke. Every day is a negotiation with risk, and survival is measured not only in output but in unscathed limbs and lungs. Tonight, a near disaster occurs. A cauldron, improperly stoked, overheats. Smoke fills the room, and a small flare threatens the surrounding wax and wooden furniture. Thomas reacts instinctively, using a damp cloth to smother the small flames while alerting the master candle maker, Mr. Fairchild, who arrives with a bucket of water. The flare is contained, but the episode underscores the ever-present danger. One lapse, one momentary distraction, and a single misjudged movement could have resulted in serious injury or fire consuming the workshop. The psychological weight of such moments is immense. Apprentices must maintain constant vigilance while performing physically taxing labor. Burned hands, blistered arms, and fatigue-twisted backs are reminders that the cost of error is high. Yet, each close call also reinforces the lessons learned. Careful observation, calm response, and anticipatory skill are the difference between survival and disaster. This combination of physical and mental resilience is a defining characteristic of candle makers, forged in the crucible of risk and repetition. Health consequences accumulate over years. Chronic coughing, scorched skin, and eye irritation leave permanent marks on the body. Long-term exposure to fumes can lead to respiratory illness, while repeated burns may scar the skin for life. Apprentices who survive to adulthood often carry these reminders of labor with them, a testament to the physical demands that sustain the glow of Victorian society. Yet the human capacity for endurance is remarkable. Those who master the craft develop both resilience and pride, knowing that their labor directly supports the rhythm of urban life. Social recognition is minimal but not absent. The work is invisible to most, but those who rely on candlelight churches, households, theaters benefit from its constancy. The candle maker's labor enables nighttime activity, commerce, and cultural life. Apprentices, despite the harsh conditions, gain skills that offer long-term employment and social mobility. Mastery of the craft provides authority, respect within the workshop, and a degree of financial security that eludes many other laborers of the era. Yet the human cost is undeniable. Many apprentices never survive the full training period unscathed. Burns, respiratory illness, and fatigue force some to leave the trade, while others endure injury and lifelong ailments. Survival in the candle trade is a combination of skill, vigilance, and at times sheer luck. Each worker who completes a season or a career is a testament to endurance, a quiet hero sustaining the city's light against the hazards that few ever consider. The relationship between human labor and technological necessity is evident. Wax, wicks, and flame are simple materials, but their controlled use is complex and dangerous. Candle makers form a bridge between raw material and societal benefit, translating skill into safety, reliability, and illumination. Without their labor, urban life would falter after dark. Commerce, domestic activity, and social gatherings all depend on their endurance. This hidden labor shapes the rhythm of society, demonstrating the interdependence of human skill and daily survival. As Thomas wipes sweat from his brow and steps back from the last table, he surveys the room. The candles are neatly arranged, ready for delivery to homes and shops. The glow from a single lamp illuminates the soot-streaked walls, revealing faces marked by smoke, fatigue, and concentration. In this quiet moment, there is both relief and reflection. Survival is never guaranteed, yet today, like so many others, the work is complete. Life continues because of labor that is painstaking, repetitive, and perilous. Historically, candle makers reveal the often unseen backbone of Victorian society. Their work, though repetitive and hazardous, sustains the rhythms of daily life. Through careful attention, endurance, and skill, they provided light that enabled society to function safely after dark. The trade illustrates the intersection of human resilience, technological necessity, and social dependence. It also underscores a recurring theme in history, that the seemingly ordinary labor of ordinary people sustains extraordinary systems, often without recognition. And yet, one lingering question remains. How many lives were quietly scarred, bodies weakened, or spirits taxed in service of this illumination? The glow of a candle is warm and steady, yet it hides the toil, danger, and endurance required to bring it to light. Survival in the candle workshop is fragile, dependent on vigilance, skill, and human resilience, a precarious balance that shapes both individual lives and society as a whole. Story 6. Sewer Rats and Sanitation. Life beneath the streets of Victorian London. Beneath the bustling streets of Victorian London, a hidden world thrives, dark, damp, and pungent. The sewers carry the city's waste, a network of tunnels and drains that stretch for miles, unseen by most residents. To John Ellis, a sewer maintenance worker, this is both workplace and crucible. His day begins not with sunlight, but with the smell of stagnant water, the hiss of escaping gas, and the constant reminder that the environment is as hostile as it is necessary. Sewer work is physically and mentally taxing. Workers descend into narrow brick tunnels, wading through waist-deep water, navigating slippery surfaces, and lifting heavy tools to clear blockages. The air is thick with a mixture of sewage, methane, and damp stone, assaulting the senses and creating long-term health risks. Respiratory irritation, nausea, and skin infections are common. Protective clothing is minimal. Oilskins, boots, and gloves provide limited relief, but survival depends on endurance and careful attention to hazards. The job is relentless. Blockages must be cleared, tunnels inspected, and pumps maintained. These tasks are critical. Failure leads to flooding, contamination, and the spread of disease. Cholera, typhoid, and dysentery are constant threats, and sewer workers are often the first to encounter the sources of outbreaks. Every step in the tunnels carries risk. A misjudged footing can send a worker tumbling into waterborne filth. A sudden gas pocket can cause asphyxiation. An unnoticed structural weakness can lead to collapse. Sewers are labyrinthine. Workers must memorize routes, recognize structural markers, and anticipate the behavior of flowing water. Darkness is constant, broken only by lanterns or torches, whose light casts eerie shadows on the brick walls. Rats scurry in the corners, unafraid of human presence, and the sound of dripping water echoes endlessly. The work requires mental acuity alongside physical strength. Misreading a tunnel's layout or failing to notice rising water can have fatal consequences. Health hazards are compounded by exposure. Methane and hydrogen sulfide build up in poorly ventilated areas, causing dizziness, headaches, and even unconsciousness. Infection from bacteria and parasites in stagnant water is a daily threat. Cuts, scrapes, and abrasions can quickly become infected. Workers develop strategies to cope, packing themselves, using improvised tools to avoid direct contact with sewage, and watching for subtle environmental signs of danger. Survival is a delicate balance of skill, vigilance, and physical endurance. Social conditions are harsh. Sewer workers are often marginalized, performing essential yet reviled labor. They earn low wages despite the risk and skill required. Families rely on their income, yet the work isolates them from domestic life, often leaving them exhausted or ill at the end of each shift. Apprentices or new hires face a steep learning curve, gaining experience through exposure to both the environment and the accumulated knowledge of senior workers. Mistakes are costly, and the learning process is both physically punishing and psychologically demanding. Equipment is rudimentary. Buckets, rods, and hand tools are supplemented by makeshift devices, as municipal oversight and investment are minimal. Workers rely on ingenuity and experience to overcome obstacles, clearing blockages, shoring up tunnel walls and navigating water currents. The labor is a constant negotiation between available technology, human endurance, and environmental hazards. Success requires both practical skill and intuition honed over repeated exposure to the hazards of the underground. Despite the unpleasantness, there is a sense of pride. Workers understand that their labor safeguards public health, prevents flooding, and keeps the city functioning. Without their efforts, the streets above would become rivers of filth, and disease would spread more rapidly. Their work is largely invisible to the public, yet indispensable. Each cleared tunnel, repaired pump, or reinforced wall is a quiet triumph against the chaos beneath the city's surface. The psychological demands are formidable. The darkness, isolation, and constant exposure to filth and danger create a persistent mental strain. Workers develop acute awareness of their surroundings. Subtle changes in water flow, unusual odors, or the sounds of rats and shifting brick can indicate potential hazards. Concentration is essential, but fatigue accumulates, making vigilance increasingly difficult. Survival is as much a test of mental endurance as it is of physical capability. And yet, despite skill, care, and vigilance, uncertainty is constant. Sudden flooding, structural collapse, or exposure to disease can undo hours of careful work in moments. Every shift survived is a testament to endurance, observation, and adaptability. Workers must navigate the unpredictable underground world with patience, courage, and a willingness to endure discomfort and danger for the sake of the city above. As John pauses to rest in a narrow alcove, the river of filth flowing past his boots, and the dim lantern light reflecting off wet brick, a question lingers. How much can human endurance withstand the constant exposure to danger, disease, and filth? And how many lives, unseen and unsung, are quietly dedicated to sustaining the rhythm and safety of a city built on fragile infrastructure? The tunnels stretch endlessly, a dark maze beneath the streets. John Ellis wades through water that chills his legs and seeps through worn boots, the stench of sewage thick in his nostrils. Each step demands attention. A submerged obstacle, a loose brick, or a sudden surge of current could send him sprawling. Even after years of experience, the unpredictability of the environment demands constant vigilance. Survival in the sewers is a matter of skill, observation, and endurance qualities, forged in repeated exposure to both danger and filth. Physical strain dominates. Muscles ache from lifting heavy rods, shovels, and debris. Bending, crouching, and balancing in narrow tunnels leave joints stiff and bodies exhausted. Cuts and scrapes from sharp brick edges are common, and contact with contaminated water introduces risk of infection. The repetitive nature of the labor compounds fatigue, creating a tension between urgency and careful movement. Efficiency is necessary, yet haste increases danger. Every task is a negotiation between speed and safety. Environmental hazards are relentless. Methane and hydrogen sulfide pockets can accumulate without warning, leading to dizziness or unconsciousness. Sudden flooding from rain or upstream blockages can sweep workers off their feet. Rats, prolific and unafraid, gnaw at tools, bite when startled, and scurry in unnerving swarms, adding a layer of unpredictable stress. Structural instability is constant. Cracks in brickwork, loose mortar, and collapsing arches remind workers that the tunnels are alive and impermanent. Disease looms invisibly. Sewage contains bacteria, parasites, and organic matter that threaten cholera, dysentery, and other infections. Workers must navigate contaminated water while maintaining physical contact with tools and surfaces, often without adequate protective clothing. Skin lesions become entry points for infection, respiratory exposure accumulates, and exhaustion weakens immune defenses. Knowledge, vigilance, and experience are the primary defenses, though luck remains an essential ally. Social pressures amplify the strain. Sewer workers are essential, yet largely invisible. Low wages and long hours weigh on families, while apprentices must learn the craft under harsh conditions. Mistakes are punished not only by physical risk, but also by reprimand from supervisors who understand the city cannot afford delays or accidents. Experience is valued, but survival requires navigating social hierarchies as carefully as the tunnels themselves. Reputation, skill, and endurance intersect in a precarious balance that shapes both career and livelihood. Mental fortitude is crucial. The darkness, isolation, and constant exposure to filth and danger impose psychological strain. Workers develop acute observation. Subtle changes in water flow, temperature, or odor can signal a potential hazard. Fatigue blurs perception, yet attention cannot lapse. Workers also cultivate patience and resilience, recognizing that prolonged exposure to harsh conditions is inevitable. Mental endurance becomes inseparable from physical survival, shaping character as surely as the labor shapes muscles and joints. Coping strategies emerge through necessity. Workers share knowledge of safe routes, markers for rising water, and early warning signs of structural weaknesses. Tools are adapted for efficiency and safety. Improvisation is essential, and communication through knocks, shouts, or signals helps coordinate labor in near-total darkness. Survival depends on a combination of individual skill and collective knowledge, where teamwork can prevent disaster even when the environment seems implacable. Despite the grim conditions, there is purpose. Each cleared tunnel prevents flooding, each repaired pump safeguards health, and each day of labor keeps the city functioning. John understands that the risks he endures sustain life above ground. The work is invisible to the majority, but its impact is undeniable. Children, families, and businesses rely on the safety and sanitation maintained by the efforts of unseen laborers. This awareness, however subtle, reinforces perseverance and pride amidst suffering. Seasonal challenges shape the rhythm of work. Winter brings increased risk of hypothermia and freezing of water in tunnels, compounding hazards of physical labor. Summer intensifies noxious odors and accelerates bacterial growth, amplifying disease risk. Rainfall and tides affect flow rates unpredictably, requiring constant recalculation of task strategy. Survival is an ongoing negotiation between human endurance, environmental conditions, and the limitations of available technology. Yet uncertainty remains omnipresent. Structural collapse, sudden flooding, or exposure to dangerous gases can undo hours of labor in moments. Disease may strike silently, and exhaustion compounds every error. Every day survived is a small victory, every successful task a testament to skill and resilience. Still, the question lingers. How long can the human body and mind endure such relentless exposure to danger, disease, and isolation before fatigue or misfortune claims its toll? The Thames winds above, its surface calm and indifferent, while below John Ellis navigates a labyrinth of tunnels teeming with danger. Water rises unexpectedly in certain sections, turning familiar passages into treacherous currents. He braces himself, gripping a brick ledge to maintain balance, mud and sewage splashing into boots already saturated from hours of labor. Each movement is deliberate, honed through years of experience, yet the environment is unpredictable. The sewers are alive, and survival is never guaranteed. A sudden, sharp hiss warns of methane buildup ahead. John signals his fellow worker, and together they retreat to a safer section of the tunnel. Moments like this are routine but critical. Misjudgment could mean unconsciousness or worse. Workers must constantly anticipate hazards, interpret subtle environmental cues, and act decisively. Experience allows survival, but fatigue and miscalculation remain ever-present threats. The physical endurance, vigilance, and mental acuity required are formidable, shaping not only the body but the character of those who labor here. Accidents occur despite caution. A young apprentice slips into a fast-moving channel of sewage, swept briefly downstream before John and another worker can pull him to safety. Panic, relief, and exhaustion mix as they recover the boy, a vivid reminder that the subterranean environment is both workplace and crucible. Survival depends on skill, alertness, and often sheer luck. For many, years of labor leave permanent scars. injuries, chronic respiratory problems, and psychological stress. The city above benefits, yet the cost is borne quietly beneath the streets. Long-term exposure shapes health in subtle ways. Respiratory illness, skin conditions, and fatigue accumulate over years. Workers adapt through packing, careful observation, and protective routines, but the dangers cannot be entirely avoided. Each day survived is a victory against the twin threats of environment and disease. Families depend on this labor, businesses rely on functional infrastructure, and the city itself thrives, unaware of the daily human struggle sustaining it. Socially, sewer workers remain marginalized. Low wages, invisible labor, and societal indifference characterize their role. Yet within the profession, a quiet pride emerges. Knowledge of tunnels, currents, and hazards fosters authority, while survival skills earn respect among peers. Experience becomes both shield and currency, translating into reputation and, for some, modest advancement. The labor is hazardous, grueling, and largely unseen, yet its value is undeniable. It sustains life, prevents disease, and maintains the rhythm of the city above. The work also carries psychological weight. Darkness, isolation, and exposure to filth generate ongoing stress. Workers develop resilience, focus, and an almost instinctive awareness of danger. These mental adaptations are as crucial as physical strength, forming a survival toolkit honed in extreme conditions. Fatigue is constant, yet adaptation allows continued labor, and collective knowledge within the workforce mitigates some risk. Every hour in the tunnels reinforces the interdependence of skill, vigilance, and endurance. Incremental improvements emerge over time. Municipal reforms introduce better ventilation, more robust construction, and rudimentary safety protocols. Pumps are maintained to reduce flooding, and sewage flow is regulated to prevent catastrophic blockages. Still, technology does not replace human labor. It amplifies the value of experience, skill, and endurance. Sewer workers remain indispensable, their labor forming the foundation of urban sanitation and public health. At the end of a long shift, John surfaces into the streets above. The city appears orderly and clean, a stark contrast to the chaos below. The success of his labor is invisible to most, yet it is tangible in the absence of flooding, the containment of disease, and the uninterrupted functioning of daily life. Exhaustion and filth cling to him, but there is satisfaction in the knowledge that his efforts have prevented calamity. Each day is a silent triumph, a testament to endurance and resilience in one of the most hazardous occupations of Victorian London. Historically, sewer workers illuminate the hidden infrastructure of survival. Their labor safeguards public health, prevents environmental catastrophe, and ensures the daily function of the city. While largely unrecognized, their work shaped the rhythm, safety, and sanitation of urban life. Sewer labor exemplifies the intersection of human resilience, skill, and societal dependence. Ordinary people performing extraordinary work, often invisible to the beneficiaries of their efforts. And yet, one question remains. How many lives, health, and spirits were quietly expended to maintain this fragile balance beneath the streets? The labor of sewer workers is a story of endurance, risk, and unseen heroism, a reminder that the functioning of society often rests on the hidden, perilous efforts of those who dwell in the shadows. Story 7. The Chimney Sweep's Curse, Children and Smoke in Victorian Homes. The streets of Victorian London are cold and foggy, yet in countless households, fireplaces burn steadily, filling homes with warmth and light. To maintain this comfort, someone must descend into narrow flues and soot-filled chimneys, a task often assigned to the smallest, most agile hands: children. 8-year-old Samuel Blake is one such laborer, his body small enough to fit into the tight confines of chimneys, yet enduring work that would challenge the strongest adult. The job is brutal and dangerous. Chimneys are narrow, winding, and often coated in thick layers of soot. Children like Samuel climb, slide, and squeeze through vertical shafts, scraping against brick and residue. Cuts, abrasions, and burns are common, Accidents can lead to broken bones or suffocation. Falls from rooftops are frequent, and some chimneys collapse under pressure, trapping or crushing the unwary. Yet the demand for clean flues is constant. Families rely on sweeping to prevent fires and ensure warmth during harsh winters. Physical strain dominates daily life. The climb up to a chimney's entrance is exhausting. The descent into darkness tests courage and strength. Once inside, children must maneuver carefully, balancing and scraping soot with rudimentary brushes or scrapers. The labor is monotonous yet perilous, requiring attention and endurance. Each movement carries risk. A slip could mean injury or death. A misjudged shift of weight might wedge a child in the narrow shaft. Survival is a blend of skill, agility, and luck. The environment is oppressive. Chimneys are hot, filled with smoke and ash, and often lined with toxic residues from coal fires. Breathing is difficult, skin becomes coated in grime, and eyes sting from constant exposure. Respiratory illness, soot eczema, and chronic cough are common among child sweeps. Protective clothing is non-existent. Children work in rags or the same clothes they wear to the streets. Each day spent in this environment erodes health, yet the labor is inescapable for those dependent on wages for survival. Social exploitation compounds the hazards. Young chimney sweeps are often sold into apprenticeship by poor families or coerced by unscrupulous masters. They live in cramped quarters near the streets, eat little, and sleep poorly. Discipline is harsh. Punishment for disobedience or inefficiency is frequent, sometimes violent. Children are valued for their size and endurance, not for well-being or education. Labor is both survival strategy and social trap, binding vulnerable children to a dangerous trade with minimal compensation. Economic pressures dictate the rhythm of life. Sweeps are paid per job, incentivizing speed over safety. Families rely on income from these children, yet wages are meager, creating a cycle of poverty and labor dependence. Seasonal variations affect demand. Winter increases the need for clean flues, lengthening hours and intensifying risk. Apprenticeship in the trade is a harsh education. Skill ensures survival and income, yet comes at a high cost to body and mind. Mental resilience is critical. Darkness, isolation, and constant danger impose psychological strain. Fear of injury, suffocation, or falls is ever present. Children develop heightened spatial awareness, careful planning, and nerves of steel. Yet fatigue and anxiety accumulate, and the mental burden mirrors the physical toll. Survival requires focus, endurance, and a mindset forged in perilous, confined spaces. Work is socially invisible. Household owners benefit from warm, safe fires without recognizing the labor behind them. Children labor silently, their pain and struggle hidden from view. Masters profit from their labor, yet little concern is given to health or safety. The labor sustains urban life, yet its human cost is ignored. In this invisibility lies both vulnerability and resilience. Survival depends on skill, endurance, and the ability to navigate a system indifferent to well-being. Despite the dangers, there is pride and mastery in skill. Children learn the subtle art of maneuvering through flues, clearing soot efficiently, and working in unlit, hazardous spaces. Every chimney cleaned without injury is a small triumph. Apprentices develop dexterity, endurance, and courage under pressure, skills that become integral to survival. The trade is as much a test of character as it is of physical ability, shaping young lives in ways both visible and invisible. And yet, a haunting question remains. How long can a child endure such grueling, dangerous labor before injury, illness, or exhaustion intervenes? The risk is ever present, the cost high, and the labor essential. Survival in this hidden, perilous world is as much a matter of fortune as of skill and endurance, leaving the lives of these children fragile and uncertain. The morning fog lingers over London as Samuel Blake climbs onto the rooftops, the chill of winter biting through his thin coat. Below, the streets bustle with activity, unaware of the peril concealed in their chimneys. Samuel's small frame is an advantage here. He can squeeze into flues that no adult could traverse. But advantage does not equal safety. Narrow passages twist unpredictably, and soot-coated bricks offer little grip. One wrong move could leave him wedged, burned, or worse. The work is physically punishing. Samuel spends hours crouched, crawling and sliding, his hands scraped and blistered from contact with rough brick and hot soot. Muscles ache constantly from bending and stretching in confined spaces, and repeated strain takes a cumulative toll. Falling is a constant hazard, both within the chimney and from the roofs above. Apprentices quickly learn that careful, deliberate movement is the only path to survival, yet fatigue makes every climb riskier than the last. The environment is hostile to health. Smoke and ash irritate the eyes, nose, and throat. Cold dust settles on skin and hair, causing rashes and eczema, and exposure to soot over years can result in chronic respiratory conditions. Children labor in this environment daily, with minimal breaks and no protective gear. Even simple tasks like scraping soot become exercises in risk management. Too much force risks injury. Too little fails to remove flammable residue, endangering both the household and the child. The social context intensifies the strain. Apprentices live under harsh discipline, often under the authority of masters who prioritize efficiency over safety. Physical punishment for mistakes is common, and verbal reprimand is relentless. Survival requires both obedience and cunning. A child must anticipate hazards in the chimney while also navigating the capricious temper of the master. The system rewards endurance and skill, but punishes vulnerability, creating a constant pressure on young bodies and minds. Economic necessity drives the labor. Wages are low, and many apprentices are sent into the trade by poor families desperate for income. Seasonal demand peaks during winter, lengthening workdays and intensifying risk. Apprentices are acutely aware that survival is tied not just to skill, but to earning a wage that their families depend upon. This creates a feedback loop of pressure. The more essential their labor, the greater the physical and psychological burden they bear. Mental fortitude is critical. The darkness of chimneys, combined with the risk of suffocation or fall, imposes constant stress. Children develop keen awareness of their bodies and environment. They learn to read the subtle shifts in brick, the temperature of soot, and the faint signs of obstruction. Focus must remain unwavering, for distraction can be deadly. Over time, apprentices develop nerves of steel, acute spatial perception, and an instinctive sense of risk, skills that sustain life in these perilous confines. Workplace hazards extend beyond the chimney itself. Rooftops are slippery with rain, uneven tiles, and ice. Tools are rudimentary and sometimes unsafe. Scrapers with sharp edges, brushes with splintered handles, and buckets that are cumbersome on narrow ledges. Falls, cuts, and bruises are common, yet children continue day after day. Adaptation is necessary. Improvising grips, moving deliberately, and learning subtle tricks of leverage and balance become survival techniques honed through experience. Despite monotony and danger, skill yields pride. Samuel takes quiet satisfaction in completing a difficult chimney without mishap, scraping soot efficiently, and exiting safely. Each successful sweep is a small triumph, a confirmation that endurance, dexterity, and courage can overcome the environment's hazards. This sense of mastery is rare in the lives of children, whose labor is otherwise undervalued and invisible, yet it provides a psychological reward that sustains them through hardship. Health and survival are precarious. Accumulated exposure to soot, cramped postures, and repeated minor injuries leave lasting scars on the body. Respiratory conditions develop, skin remains marked by chemical irritants, and exhaustion accumulates like sediment over time. Apprentices often exit the trade with bodies permanently shaped by labor, hunched backs, scarred hands, and lungs weakened by years of smoke. Survival is not only about completing each day, but also enduring the cumulative toll over months and years. Yet the most haunting question remains. How much endurance can a child muster before the body and mind succumb to the hazards of this work? How many accidents, illnesses, or long-term effects remain unrecorded, quietly shaping a generation of children whose labor ensured warmth and safety for families who scarcely noticed their toil. The answer is unknowable, yet the struggle continues daily in the narrow, smoke-filled shafts of Victorian homes. Story 7. The Chimney Sweep's Curse: Children and Smoke in Victorian Homes. The sun is barely above the rooftops as Samuel Blake climbs from the chimney of a large townhouse, soot streaked across his face and body. His muscles ache from crouching and sliding for hours, his lungs tight from inhaling smoke and coal dust. Yet he survived another day, a feat that requires skill, endurance, and constant vigilance. Each successful sweep is a quiet victory, yet every day carries the potential for catastrophe. Falls, burns, suffocation, or respiratory illness loom at every turn. The risks are constant. Narrow chimneys twist unpredictably. A misjudged turn can wedge a child in place, requiring external rescue. Smoke and residual heat can overwhelm even the fittest apprentice. Accidents occur with alarming frequency, and injuries can be severe or fatal. Historical records detail children who were crushed, burned, or suffocated in the pursuit of this labor. Every sweep is a negotiation with danger, and survival depends on careful planning, awareness, and sometimes luck. Physical tolls accumulate. Years of exposure leave permanent scars, lungs weakened by soot, skin marked with burns or abrasions, and backs hunched from crawling through confined spaces. Children often emerge into adulthood bearing the consequences of labor they had little choice but to endure. Yet mastery brings resilience. The skills, strength, and precision developed in the chimneys become essential tools for survival, both within and beyond the trade. Socially, chimney sweeps are marginalized. Masters profit from the labor of children, yet little care is given to their well-being. Families rely on the wages, often sacrificing education and health. Public perception is indifferent or unaware. Warmth and safe fires are assumed necessities, yet the invisible labor behind them is overlooked. In this environment, resilience is both a survival mechanism and a source of quiet pride. Apprentices learn to navigate danger, endure hardship, and complete the task efficiently, skills that define their lives. Mental resilience is as crucial as physical endurance. Fear is constant, yet focus cannot falter. Apprentices develop heightened awareness of movement, airflow, and temperature within each chimney. They anticipate obstacles, conserve energy strategically, and learn to act swiftly under pressure. Psychological adaptation ensures survival in conditions that would overwhelm an untrained adult. The child who emerges each day intact demonstrates extraordinary fortitude, often unrecognized outside the trade. The rhythm of work underscores the fragility of life. Winter brings increased demand, requiring longer hours and more frequent climbs. Summer heat intensifies the discomfort and exposure. Seasonal pressures compound the inherent risks, yet survival is a daily necessity. Each successful day reinforces endurance, skill, and adaptability. Those who persevere are physically hardened, psychologically resilient, and intimately acquainted with danger qualities that mark their passage from childhood into adolescence. Incremental improvements in legislation and public awareness begin to emerge during the Victorian period, slowly offering protection. Laws to prevent the use of very young children and to improve working conditions gradually take effect. Yet the legacy of danger, injury, and long-term health consequences persists for generations. Many adult chimney sweeps bear the visible and invisible scars of a childhood spent navigating perilous flues, a stark reminder of the human cost behind a simple household fire. As Samuel steps down from the roof, brushing soot from his clothes, he contemplates the paradox of his labor. He is essential to the functioning and safety of households, yet his work is undervalued, dangerous, and largely invisible. Every sweep represents the intersection of necessity, endurance, and risk. Warmth and light are maintained at the cost of childhood, health, and sometimes life itself. This labor sustains society, yet its human price is rarely acknowledged. Historically, child chimney sweeps reveal the hidden, perilous work that underpins daily life. Their labor protected homes from fire, enabled comfort during winter, and maintained the functioning of countless households. At the same time, it exacted a heavy toll. Physical injury, chronic illness, and psychological strain shaped generations. These children exemplify resilience, endurance, and the harsh realities of labor-dependent survival in Victorian society. And yet, one question remains haunting. How many lives, health, and potential were quietly consumed to illuminate and warm